Welcome back to A Book Binger. My name's Shelby, and I am a girl who's binging a new book each week instead of binging Netflix. Let's get started on this week's book. Hello, fellow book lovers! Another week, another book. This week's book is recommended by Michaela. I met Michaela through my husband. They've been friends for years. She actually married my husband's best friend. So that makes us automatic friends, right? Well, let me go ahead and get started by introducing this book. The title of the book is The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. Here is the book description. She was magical, beautiful beyond belief, and completely alone. The unicorn had lived since before memory in a forest where death could touch nothing. Maidens who caught a glimpse of her glory were blessed by enchantment they would never forget. But outside her wondrous realm, dark whispers and rumors carried a message she could not ignore. Unicorns are gone from the world. Aided by a bumbling magician and an indomitable spinster, she set out to learn the truth. But she feared even her immortal wisdom meant nothing in a world where a mad king's curse and terror incarnate lived only to stalk the last unicorn to her doom. So, Michaela and I are going to be talking about our thoughts, opinions, insights on this book, The Last Unicorn. It's a wonderful read. I recommend it. If you don't want to hear any spoilers, go ahead to my website, click the link, download this book, download it on YouTube to listen to it. That's how Michaela was doing it for the second time around of her reading. And I also just went to the library and picked it up. Or you could go ahead and support Peter and buy his book. I have a link in my website as well where you can go on Amazon and buy the book. So here we go. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast, with everything you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Let's do this. I'm ready.
Awesome. So I wanted to kick it off how you came across The Last Unicorn.
So excellent question. Let me go back like 2.5 years, okay? So this starts with Jamie, actually. So Jamie, who's my husband, he is really lucky. he will put in for, lottery things, and he'll get picked first, like that's how lucky he is. So he put in for a sweepstakes for books, and he won the sweepstakes for a ton of books, like $800 worth of books.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And The Last Unicorn was one of them. Came in the box, and his dad saw the book and was like, "This is a great book." And I looked at it and was like, "That sounds like a stupid book, just like about a freaking unicorn." And anyway, so last year when COVID was hot and heavy at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
Jamie and I decided to do like a book. We would read a book every other week or something. And we had like a mini book club. So it was really fun. We read a lot of books, and this was one of them. And I was not expecting to actually enjoy it. And I loved it. Like at the end, I think I cried a little bit because it was just such a tragic ending. And I was like, oh my gosh, but it was so good. And so that's how we ran into The Last Unicorn. Oh my gosh, such a gem.
Telling my mom I was reading this book, and she flipped out because she didn't realize it was a book because there is a The Last
And it's
Unicorn.
awful.
No, she agrees. She loves it because of nostalgia. But her and her sister, they would watch it constantly.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
So you've seen it then.
Yeah, I mean, I think I stopped after the point of like the weird tree thing, and then I was like, no, I'm not watching this.
See,
There's
I
like a
haven't
weird
seen
tree.
it.
So if you like, I mean, in the book, of course, Schmendrick has this weird dream about a tree that's in love with him. And
Oh, yeah.
then, yeah. And it's like a weird tree. I don't know.
Gotcha. Okay. Enough said. Right there.
Yes. My friend
That's-
calls it the boob tree, so
Oh
that
my
gives you an
gosh.
idea.
That is hilarious. Well, my mom flipped out when I told her it was a book, and so she's going to start reading it, and in turn, she's going to show me the during Christmas. So I will
Oh my
prepare
gosh.
myself for the boob tree.
It'll be a delight. I think you will enjoy it, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh. Also, Jamie need to start entering stuff for me, man. Like,
I know.
amazing.
I know. Like
Lucky duck.
he didn't even tell me about it, and all of a sudden we had like 2 humongous boxes of books. And I was like, what is this? He's like, oh, I entered a sweepstakes.
And I won. No big deal.
Yeah, okay.
That's awesome.
It was delightful.
Well, and those of you who don't know, Ben actually do have their own podcast. It's called Bushwhacking with Jack and Fish. I'll put a link out underneath this podcast. You guys should go check it out because they are hilarious. Just a little input there. So back to the real reason why we're talking. So The Last Unicorn, honestly, it took me a little longer to get started. But I think because it's hard for me with fantasy to get into these worlds that they talk about. Like, they describe these settings and these different locations, and my mind kind of gets all mixed up, and I'm like, wait, where are they at? Who is who? What is what? All these things. Did you have that problem when you were reading, or does that just kind of come easily to you?
I think I'm the same way. Where any fantasy book I read, of course it's a new world, it's totally different, but at the same time, like I feel like Peter did a really good job at making the world simple enough that you could still like mostly focus on the characters. For me, the characters are the biggest part for me in a fantasy book. But yeah, I'm with you. It is hard to kind of follow. And the way that Peter wrote this book, like there's a lot of poetry in it.
Oh.
And I'm not a humongous fan of poetry. But sometimes it was done very strategically. Like, you know, like the butterfly just saying a bunch of weird things, but it was poetic, you know?
Well, that was because that was like one of the first couple pages, and he just thing, and the frick is this butterfly talking?
Oh, for sure.
I could not keep up with it, and so I had to reread it a couple times because I was like, wait, does this actually pertain to something? Is this poem supposed to be a tipping point for something? I think I got in my head too much about it, and I spent way too much time on the butterfly.
Me too.
Because it's just like, and I mean, it says that though. It says that the butterfly is pretty much incoherent and doesn't really ever say anything serious. So I should have just taken it as that. But I didn't. I spent way too much time trying to interpret it.
You're like, this means something. I know it does. What does it mean?
I know. I spent like days trying to get over that hump, but I just should go back and be like, Shelby, what are you doing? Just get out of there.
Forget the butterfly. Forget it.
I feel like every chapter there was at least one, and then sometimes in certain chapters there were 2 or 3 sections of poetry.
Yeah, well, and I thought it was interesting. So the second time that I've read this book, which is, this time reading it to prepare for our podcast together, I actually listened to it on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually really kind of fun. The girl wasn't the best reader, but I actually enjoyed her like singing the poetry. Like she would sing.
Oh,
It was really cute and fun.
yeah.
And I kind of liked that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
that was
think that's awesome.
enjoyable.
I like that a lot. With the characters, which one was your favorite?
This is an interesting question because I love the unicorn, of course.
Mm-hmm.
She's a delight, but I kind of like Schmendrick. I think I kind of relate to him a little more than anyone. Like Molly's okay. She's a little too aggressive for me sometimes, but
Yeah.
I just like how Schmendrick was the first person that actually saw the unicorn as she was.
Right.
And like he's just so full of flaws, but like he knows he is. He's kind of humble about it, and he's just trying so hard to connect to this inner part of himself. And I don't know. I really like Schmendrick. I think he's my favorite. But what about you?
I think definitely the unicorn, like Lady Amathia, because this sweet innocence that was pure. But I think I really liked her struggle of knowing that there was something more. He did a really great job at describing her pure innocence.
Yeah, she was like the epitome of like composure.
Yeah. For like the character itself with the attributes, probably the unicorn, because she did have this kind of like, well, I'm a unicorn. I don't really care for things the way people care for things, but I do know that I need to find out if I am the last unicorn. Like that's important. And
I loved how like aggressive she would be sometimes. Like, no, I don't feel that.
Yeah.
Going into what you're talking about, like I never expected The Last Unicorn to be considered like a love story or something romantic. That was something that totally threw me off. Like first reading it, I was like, okay, this is going to be an adventure book. It's going to be all about innocence and being kind of childlike. But no, it becomes this like all of a sudden love story, and it also is simultaneously about being innocent and like exploring all of these hardships of life. And that little group became a family. Molly, Schmendrick, and the unicorn were a family. They were taking care of each other, and she learned what that meant because she's been alone for hundreds of years and had no idea what it was like.
That's a good point, because love interest of Prince Lear and Lady Athmalia, or however you say it, Lady,
I don't even know.
Whatever. That threw me for a curve because there hadn't been any love interest until that moment.
It was interesting. And yeah, because when you were talking about what she's like, the way I say her name is Lady Amalthea. I'm also probably saying it super wrong, but I looked up what it meant, and it meant, let's see. It's like innocent goddess, or like pure goddess, or something like that.
Spot on. Yeah.
And I actually thought that was interesting. Like he was so interested in her name, but we never knew the unicorn's name. Like I still don't think we know the unicorn's name, or even if she had one. But he,
Yeah, it doesn't mention that there would be a name at all. So, yeah.
yeah, and it's, I don't know, that love interest was just like, to me it kind of felt left field, but
Mhm.
once like he wrapped it up at the end, I was like,
Oh.
wow, what a crazy cool thing to put at the end, because it's just like so tragic and so
Right?
deep.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah,
Seriously. That was intense.
tears.
Yes. That's
It's
the
like,
only way to describe it.
made me cry.
And at first I missed it. I read through it and I was like, wait, hold up. And I had to take a step back and I had to reread it because it was just like there was so much going on. And then that happened. And I don't really want to give a spoiler, but that was just
It was
massive.
intense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when so I had talked to a few other people who had read this book and they liked Smendrick too. That was the most common likable character that I found. And I think because he is just that quirky wizard where he's not like a typical wizard in other stories. I think of the wizard in like the Black Cauldron where he's old, the long beard, and he's like, I know every spell there is to know. And that's definitely not Smendrick. And his character comes out with such a wonderful like forthcoming where he is trying to save the unicorn. That's the first thing that he's trying to do in this book. And so of course you're all like, oh, he's so good.
Yeah, but what I also love, because I love that too, like that's his main purpose, is to like protect the unicorn, save the unicorn, he'll do anything for her because he loves her.
Mm-hmm.
And because he can see her, and humanity, the rest of humanity only sees her as this mare,
Mm-hmm.
and I find that really fascinating. But yeah, Schmendrick is just so human.
Yeah.
He's just so like clumsy, but like he knows he is, yet he's charismatic, and
Mm-hmm.
he's just loving. He
Yeah.
wants to do what's best, and the unicorn is just like so annoyed with him.
Well, and I love that he's such like a trickster. He has just all these magic tricks that he uses. He's like, I'm this great wizard. I'm gonna pull this out of my sleeve.
Yeah, and then it goes wrong every time.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh my gosh. And he's like, yeah, I'll do all these tricks for you if I can have some. I'll do these tricks for you if I can stay here tonight.
Well, and it works.
I know. Genius. I wish I could do that today.
We could try.
Let's do it. Let's go to the park. Be like, hey, I'll pull this out of my hat if you give me a hot dog.
Okay.
I'm sure it would work. I mean, I saw that in New York all the time.
Hey, if they can do it there, we can do it here for free
Exactly.
food.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Okay, so with the book too, was there anything that you didn't like about it, or just it wasn't like really working for you at all?
Um, Overall, I felt like it was an enjoyable ride. I don't think there was anything about it where I was like, ugh, other than maybe the poetry. I think the hardest part in the book, because there's certain things like the midnight circus, there's
Mhm.
the robbers that think that they're like Robin Hood, but they're not,
Right.
and the town before King Haggard's place, and then
Mhm.
you're at King Haggard's place castle. I had the hardest time with the robbers. Like all of the singing and the poetry just became kind of annoying to me, and so I just like
Yeah.
flipped through a little bit more. That was like the only thing that I was like, why is this in here? And so this second time around with me reading it, and me actually listening to it and having someone sing the songs, which was just so fun.
Yeah.
It actually became enjoyable, because then I finally was like, oh, I see the purpose of this chapter. Like
Right.
these guys are creating an illusion that they're heroes, but they're actually just bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I think we're all, in a sense, we're kind of like the robbers with certain things, especially when like we're lying to ourselves, and justifying our actions. Um,
Ooh.
and so that's what that made me think of. Like we try to think that we're like Robin Hood in some ways. Like we are doing the best thing because we're trying to be like this person, but actually we are just doing it terribly. We're being awful people and being straight up selfish, and but we're blinded by this lie. And I think that can happen more often than we think with so many realistic things.
Wow, getting into the deep philosophy of it.
Well, I think this book kind of is philosophical, and I didn't know that it would become that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see a lot of parts where you can pull that from. When I usually read stuff, especially around, I am just reading it for story, and I usually don't pull anything out of it or like pertain it to my life. But I love that I mean, that was deep, but I thought that was 100% true. And so I really appreciate that you can do that with books, even if they're fantasy and fun. Like, I think that's so cool. I do that more because I think now that I'm like flipping through it currently, I do see a lot of places where you can relate stuff like that. I think with me in particular, the band of robbers, I did get a little bored as well because I was like, okay, come on, like let's move along. Like, why are we spending so much time here? They need to get to another place. What does
Yeah.
this matter? But yeah, if I think about it a little bit more in depth too, they were kind of preparing them for Hagsgate, which is that town before King Haggard,
Mm-hmm.
and sharing all these folklores of how terrible it is. But man, all over here.
Yes, I'm all about philosophy over here.
Is there another philosophical interpretation you wanted to share?
Oh geez. I don't know. I had looked at I went online, okay? Don't judge me. I went online
No judging.
to look and see if like other people had pulled out philosophical things.
Yeah.
Um and there's a lot of symbolism, and I don't think I can go over all of it because it doesn't mean a whole lot to me other than like this tragic love story that just ends. And I was reading the last chapter, and it just like broke my heart that when am I spoiling things when I like go into detail? Can I do that?
No, for sure. Yeah. Most of these episodes that I have with my guests, there's going to be spoilers because we just can't not talk about it.
That's true. Okay.
Impossible. I like the book. You like the book. Great. That's it. No.
Nice. That's nice. um,
Exactly.
but here, actually, let me just turn to this page really quick. I have like a bunch of things that um I have marked because I was just like, oh, it's so heartbreaking. But he gets healed. Prince Lear gets healed by the unicorn, and she just stands there for a little bit before she actually heals him.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this isn't really symbolic. This is mostly me just trying to apply, like, how does she feel? She loved this man. She actually fell in love with somebody, and she
Mm-hmm.
had never done that before because unicorns don't need to do that, right? They
Mm-hmm.
don't need to fall in love. But she experienced what it was like to be human, which was awful to her. She was absolutely devastated that she was human because she was no longer this immortal creature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's also kind of beautiful that she had that experience where she did fall in love with somebody, and it was so difficult because she probably wanted to remain with him. And that was something that was said in the book, where it's like maybe she's standing there thinking what it would be like to be in love with him and actually live with him and, you know, live happily ever after. But he doesn't. She can't go back to that again. And
Yeah.
he wakes up and, you know, he's like, what the heck? And he just wants to follow her to the ends of the earth. And it's like, wow, oh my gosh, like have I ever felt that way before towards something or someone? Or, you know, like I kind of feel that way about my the mission I served for my church. And like it's something I can never go back to. You know, I can't have those experiences like I did. I can't serve those people 100% like I did, but it's something that I think of fondly. And so I think, yes, it's tragic that I can never do that again, but I can have a piece of it with me, you know?
Oh my gosh, that is so spot on. Like, I feel the exact same way. I'm sure you think about your mission every day as well. And it's so easy to draw on those memories and just about how, I mean, you know, it's real world things where it's really difficult and there are hard times, but just overall the amount of Christ-like love that you feel. And I think that you nailed that perfectly.
Thank you.
Oh, Kayla, you're bringing all these feels.
Oh, good. Yes. Cry, Selby, cry.
Oh, I just might.
No,
Oh my
please don't.
God.
I mean, you can, but that's not my purpose.
No, I think this was just such an amazing book. I had never heard about Peter Beagle before, and I he has so many books like this, and it was just for me interesting to know that it had become a cartoon and that it was a widely known cartoon. I mean, my mother, she grew up on it, which is just so weird to me that I hadn't ever heard about this before. And it was such a big part of her life. But when I was talking to some other people about it, like it that was this was a big part of their childhood too. So I think that's just so cool that you were able to stumble upon it and that you were able to share it with me. And in turn, it just turned out to be such a great book instead of something that we look back on and be like, why did you guys like this?
Yeah, like what a waste of time. Why would you share this book with me?
Exactly.
I was
Yes.
honestly a little scared to share it with you because it kind of is weird. It's kind of a weird book.
Yeah.
But like there's something about it, you know, there's always something about magic that for some reason people love it, right? Like
Right.
Harry Potter, everybody loves Harry Potter because the magic system is so cool. You know, wizards are cool, and that was like the first book series that was actually like really enjoyable for people. You know, so whenever we think of wizards, we think of Harry Potter probably, but um this this magic is just so different. It's so unpredictable, and like he just does an interesting job of making it like relatable. He purposely tries to make it, you know, like symbolic, like I don't know. So it's just interesting and weird.
Yeah. No, and the more I think about it, the more I do think about that wizard from the Black Cauldron and like how quirky he was, and his magic was a little strange too, and it didn't always work. And or also the wizard from um the Sword and the Stone.
Oh yes.
Actually, oh my gosh, I feel like his magic never worked either.
That's true. Yes, he was kind of messy.
Yeah. And I mean that's around the same time as this, and that's probably, you know, when a lot of that wizardry, old magic, deep rooted magic was so interesting to people. And I think we need to bring that back because there's something nostalgic and interesting about that.
For sure. And I also think it's just it is its own genre of magic.
Yeah.
But in a way, it is just so realistic because magic, you know, we think of it as extremely reliable. You say these words, then it will happen, but it's actually not so. Like, you have to have your heart in it. Like, Schmendrick wanted to be a wizard, but he wasn't until he actually had a conversion moment, you know?
Right. Yeah. And it wasn't easy. It was so extremely hard. It took him months, and it wasn't necessarily what he wanted either, which I think was the big turning point on his magic of he had to surrender his entire self for good or for bad, but just everything out on the table for the magic to mend him into that great wizard.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well put.
Thank you. It's my turn to be philosophical.
Bring it on.
That's all I got.
Oh, good. That was good.
Was there any other insights, comments, or anything else you wanted to add about this book?
Well, I do have a question for you.
Oh, yes.
So what were your thoughts about the Red Bull?
Yeah. I did not like him.
Well, obviously.
Obviously. Well, I was kind of confused because it was very poetic about how it described it at first. And so I was really confused at what this thing was. It never really mended into a form at the beginning. It was just like, oh, it comes in a darkness and it is like the breeze through the trees, and like it was just really vague at first. I was like, what the heck is this thing? Like, I don't know what it is. And then it did get more into like, okay, this is the Red Bull, this is what he does. And then when it talked about King Haggard kind of had control over him, but not entirely control over him, because it was just like his emotion had control over him. That was kind of interesting to me, that it wasn't the Red Bull had it out for the unicorns, but that the Red Bull kind of was surrendered to King Haggard. That was so interesting. I don't know. It just wasn't what I was expecting, you know?
Yeah, definitely was not predictable.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I was really confused until the bull actually showed up. Like, oh, it's an actual Red Bull.
Yeah. Yeah. And when it focused so much on the unicorn and then she turned into the human and it kind of just left all the humans alone, that made a lot of sense as well, because he himself is kind of mythical too, but particularly because King Haggard had it out for the unicorn specifically, that made a lot more sense too, that it could live beneath the castle and not really cause too much damage to the surrounding towns or King Haggard himself. But yeah, it was definitely, when it explained the purpose of the Red Bull, when it explained its actions, that was, yeah, definitely not what I was expecting at all.
Yeah, totally. And the biggest question I had from the beginning, once I heard about what the Red Bull was, I was like, well, what's the purpose of this creature? Like, why would it specifically go out for the unicorns? And so, of course, you know, there's philosophical ideas, right? Like, there's different representations of what these mythical creatures are. So the unicorns are worshipped. You know, everybody loves unicorns, and it's because they're strong and they're beautiful and they're innocent and joyful, and like nothing can touch them because they're freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And the only thing that takes them down is this Red Bull. And I was like, well, what would take down, like, what would taint my joy and my innocence and, you know, things that make me strong? Like, what would that be? You know, would that be an emotion? Would that be a person? And so a lot of people think that the bull represents like blind fear or things that like are irrational,
Yeah.
that actually take down the confident part of ourselves, because the unicorn is just so confident and knows who she is until she becomes a human.
Right.
Until she faces the bull, then she runs and she's scared. And it's just so interesting to think about that. Like, and then what took her out of that was having confidence in love, like the romantic love that she had for Prince Lear.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great interpretation of the Red Bull. I think that was, again, spot on.
Thank you. I'm getting A+ right now.
You are.
It's fun to just kind of look back at what we read and think about like how all of the puzzle pieces fit together. And I don't know. I just think Peter just did a fantastic job at painting such a beautiful landscape. Like, it's tragic, it's beautiful, it's fun, it's, a lot of different things. And I think it's just cool to hear your thoughts about the book too, because there's so many ways to look at it, so many angles. And
yeah, I mean, I agree. He did such a great job. And one of the reviews that I wanted to put out there was from yet another book review site. And they said, very highly recommended. This is a darn fine book. Charming, cuttingly humorous, moving, affirming, I guess poignant, says it all. Buy it, read it, savor it. A 5 out of 5. And I totally agree with that review. Michaela has said that multiple times. She agrees with it as well. So I recommend going out and buying this book, The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. Drop in the comments what you thought of it. Go ahead and send me a voice message. I want to hear that as well. And stay tuned for our next book. I'm super excited about it. It's 1,000 White Women, and Bridget recommended it. Thanks again so much for listening to A Book Binger.
Yay!
Thanks so much, Michaela, for doing this.
It's fun. I sure love you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, The Last Unicorn, where Michaela came on board and talked about how she found the book, what she likes about it, and why she recommended it. If you haven't looked at our website, A Book Binger, please go visit it, as well as all of our other social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter. I'd love to connect with you guys and hear about what books you are reading, what books you recommend, and if you'd like to come and be on the show with me.